Welcome to Tea, Toast, and Theology, All Things Nourishing, a podcast by The Table. Find us on the web at the-table.church.
I'll begin by saying, in the last few weeks, I have been thinking a lot about how to articulate a message. Um, and the reason is because if you think about it, a person in my role, you may think I talk a lot, which is probably because whenever you see me talking. Right? Because that is how this relationship works. That's my role, to talk, right? And that's what you see, right? But if you think about it, uh, I only get half an hour at the most during a week to actually have speech for all of you. And I have been given the job of articulating the entire faith to you. How am I going to do it? How can I do it in just a limited, and out of those 30 minutes that if you go back on a live stream, you will see 15 minutes or so are usually everybody talking. So I get 15 minutes in a week. Now, you may think that that's all what because that's your perception. Whenever we see him, he is, right? But I actually get only 15 minutes. Now, I'm glad you have that perception because that means you actually know that I'm talking, which is awesome. Thank you. Right? But you see my inner struggle that I have 15 minutes to articulate a very complex thing. Right? And you might say, oh, send it in the newsletter, but Amanda knows how many people actually open it, right? Everybody here does, but out of 166 people we send it to, we get about 50% rate of opening, right? Right. So you see why I would be in that frame of mind. How do I articulate? Because I need to do that. That's my role, right? And it gets even more so when you are trying to bring along people to a new way of doing something, right? Because remember what we talked about last time? Everyone wants to think about it as what it is not, right? That's how we understand things a lot of times. What is it not, right? And so if you have to give a positive image, right, you have to create a new vision which is based not on negative language of what it is not, but on a new language, that problem becomes even bigger because you are carving out a new thing which you are also saying don't use negative words to experience that. So you're really asking a lot from people. You see? So how do you do it effectively to get people to see what this new thing is? So I've been really reflecting on that. How do you do that? And I have always loved this prayer that we had at the start of the service. And there's a reason why I went so slowly through it. Because it talks beautifully. The words are so well considered words. Read, right? Not just like, oh yeah, but just get into it. Mark. Don't just say, oh yeah, I'm going to read it. Oh, great, this was great. Because, I have found myself that, when I'm trying to, for instance, do a new project that I don't know how to do, let's say on a computer, right? I don't know how to do it. So my go-to place is YouTube, right? And my first temptation is to scrub it, to just go, okay, 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 he's not talking about it yet. Okay, 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 get me to the point, right? I don't want to listen to every word. I want to get to where my information is, right? And I want to hurry through it. And and if I come across an article about something, I'm just like going, I'm looking for that place where I would get my specific need met, right? And I will find that information that I need for helping me solve that problem. And what I have realized is that I often skip over the most important information. And it takes me 3 times more time if I had just stopped and patiently listened the first time around. Right? But I am like rushing through it, and then it doesn't get solved, and my frustration keeps growing, growing, growing. Why is it? And then finally I have to calm myself and just say, okay, I'm going to just listen to it. And voila, the information was there. Right? It has happened to me so many times, right? That I just need to stop. And that brings me to that point where oftentimes God says to us, be still. Be still and know that I am God, right? Just stop. Read, mark, learn, and inwardly digest that part. Oh my God. It's not just that, oh, I did my thing. I checked off a box. I was there. I did this, 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 this. No, let it sink in. Sit on it for a while, right? Let it just brew inside. I love that prayer, right? And so when I read through these readings, this one word, now imagine, what am I thinking about? I'm thinking about communication. I'm thinking about how to articulate, right? And the word that just popped up at me was, that was the word that Chris, the first thing he said to me this morning was, I have a question about the question. Right? And I said, uh-oh. And he said, is the use of the word provoke intentional? I'm curious, where did you get that from? And I said, it's not my thing, it's from the scripture. And it's so interesting. I don't know if people thought of it when they were putting this lectionary together, but not only does the author of Hebrews talks about that word, which is direct quote that we use for the question, but also Hannah is being provoked. I was like, oh, that's very interesting. Hannah is being provoked, and that is the kind of provocation that we, that's the meaning of the word provoke that we actually think of when we think of the word provoke, right? Something that leads you to something negative, bad, right? Causes stress or anger, frustration, maybe even making you do something illegal or whatever, right? But it's a negative thing, right? And that is how that word first appears in that reading. And then the author of Hebrews takes that word and makes us read, mark, learn, and inwardly digest that word. Right? What is going on with that word? What is happening there? And so, in my struggles to articulate, I have been thinking about what is Christian faith? So, if we were to take the story from the gospel seriously today, right? And we say, wow, Jesus says all these buildings will come down, right? And meaning that this is not where you place your faith. Now, I have to say, all of you did not place your faith in buildings, so that's why you are here, right? 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 So, thank you. That's check off that. Right? But uh, I read that and I think, are the disciples really understanding Jesus as to what he means by all these buildings will come down? Or are they actually feeling that sense of provocation? Oh, great. The people who disagree with us are going to lose everything. What are they thinking? Or just tell us when it's going to happen so that we can celebrate, right? You feel that sense. It's not about the meaning of what Jesus is saying to them. It's like coming from their own context, saying, oh, good. Like often people say that about the psalmist. That a lot, I have heard people talk about, I don't agree necessarily with that, but I've heard people talk about the psalmist, whenever the psalmist says, oh, do this to my enemies, or do that, oh, it's that human urge, right? To see your enemies in a difficult place, right? So I don't know what's happening exactly, but I do think that the disciples, just like us, and I want to emphasize that, just like us, because often there is this tendency to say, we get it and the disciples didn't, right? Just like us, they are thinking from a particular context in which they are finding themselves outside the buildings, and they are thinking, well, that would be kind of nice if they lose the building. Right? You see? And when Jesus at that time is not necessarily talking about that. So then, what is he talking about? What was he actually doing? You see, part of that whole building structure is that word that we often use here, institutionalization, right? I use it a lot, right? That buildings represent institutions, right? We actually, this is a great human urge to sort of erect a building, to show something. If you don't believe me, go to Washington, D.C. There's a whole mall of buildings to express some idea, right? All these different. Why do we do that? Because in the making of those buildings, we are trying to establish who we are. Isn't that a fascinating way to articulate ourselves, to build a building? Right? That we are trying to articulate. And what is it that Jesus is actually doing? Jesus is saying, folks, you don't need that. Just get together, have a party. But don't just have a party for the sake of having a party. Have a party for a purpose. And that purpose is to provoke one another, not just suggest. So here's the interesting, could we put that question back on the screen? Because here's the really interesting thing that happened through my mind while I was preparing for this. Because I was thinking, okay, here's this thing called provoke one another. Okay? How do I ask this question? How are you provoking people? That would be awful, right? Right? And notice Mary didn't disagree either. Yeah, yeah. Right? I really struggled. Like, how do you? Because how do you provoke actually means what? You do provoke, right? I sat there with, like, how do I phrase this question? Especially because you all know me, I don't like ambiguity. And the word might is an ambiguous word. It introduces ambiguity, right? And the only way to tone down the impact of the word provoke for me was to use the word might. Isn't that interesting? That even in asking the question, I was struggling with how much can I actually provoke, right? I love what Amanda said today and what you said today, because both of you were saying, and Al also started us off with that, and actually the story you shared, right? All of those were coming at the same point, which is sometimes it is not enough just to act. Have you ever heard of that quote that is a made up quote? St. Francis says, what? Right, preach the gospel only if necessary, use words. That quote, by the way, St. Francis never said that, okay? Uh, and he could not have said it, and here's the contextual reason why he could not have said it, because he never lived by that. He was a guy who went into the enemy lines to talk to them at a time when the world was almost at, like, the brink of war. And he went across with great strength to talk to these people. He was a provocateur, right? He was not somebody who will say, you know what, I'm going to keep quiet. Let people just focus on my great actions. You see, let people see how great my walk is. Let not anybody, I don't need to say anything to anyone. My friends, that is not how Christian faith works, right? In Christian faith, we do focus on our actions, and then we do articulate them with words. We do focus on our actions. Actions are absolutely important. And I think that was the point of your story, right? But also, that story was beautiful because everyone, whether it was a doctor or a priest, came from their own perspective and thought that they could not cross a certain limit of what their ability was. You see what I'm saying? I can only pray, sorry. Right? Well, I can only do this. If we hear ourselves, a lot of times we say that. Oh, I can only. Right? And Christian faith is saying, no, you can't. You can actually. Don't limit yourself. Don't limit yourself in saying, I can only. You can actually do more than that. And how are we going to know that we can actually do more than that? By having people around us who will provoke us in the most positive way for us to know that we should not be putting limits to what God has given us. The story of Hannah is the story of saying, I will not accept that I cannot be a mom. That is a limit I am unwilling to accept. I will believe that God will change that. And God did. Right? Right? You see the different mindset in a Christian, from a Christian perspective? So, what is it that we can take from today? My friends, Christian faith cannot be done in isolation precisely for that reason. First of all, if you were just by yourself, how are your actions even impacting anyone? Right? If you're having food by yourself, okay, the amount of chili I poured into my food is not going to make any difference to you. Right? But if you happen to be someone like my wife who's eating with me, it will certainly provoke a reaction. Right? You see, that's what happens when you do things together. You see where I'm going with this? That's what happens when you do things together. Because sometimes it is really wonderful to not be with people. But I hate to break this, that is not what Christianity is encouraging us to do. It's saying, be with people, and they're going to drive you nuts with the amount of chili they throw into it. Right? And then learn how to live with it. Learn how to say, which is what has happened in our house. I'll prepare everything, and then I'll say, honey, why don't you put the chili in it? Right? Right? Because you learn how to live with each other. Living by yourself, you really cannot have an experience of the Christian faith. It was really disheartening for me to read, and I think I shared with some of you this whole idea that there is now, this stat is mind blowing, that there is now as many people who are in the denominational churches, exception is Catholic Church, right? Catholic Church set aside, all the rest, denominational churches put together, the number of people in this country who are associated with this, the same number of people describe themselves as evangelicals who don't go to church anymore. Can you imagine that? Because that's not the image that comes to our mind with the word evangelical, right? We think of someone different, right? And that's how they describe themselves. So it's very interesting that that number is now almost equal. Just think about this. There is a whole group of people who are amongst us who feel that they are great Christians without ever having to deal with anyone else's chili powder. Think about it, right? And that is where I believe we all come in. We all come in with the message of saying, listen, we may not be the best cooks, which by the way we are. Uh, well, last night, I mean, it's great, every Saturday, which we may not be the best cooks, but guess what? You are invited. And not only invited, we are going to provoke you. We are going to provoke you to be in community. And in community, to not only just be friends, because Barbara, it's absolutely right. Lots of friends. I have apparently 1,100 friends. That's what Facebook says. But the truth is, that's not how friendship works, right? And those 1,100 friends, great as they are, and some of them I have enjoyed like great friendships over the years, like some of them are from childhood that I haven't seen in the last 30 years or whatever, and we connect through. All that is great. But the people who have a direct impact on your life today are the people who are going to be at your table. They are the ones who are right there. And I close this that I am feeling very encouraged that quite a few of you have said yes to finding someone to pray with, right? And some of you, we have already, some of you have found yourselves and said, hey, here's the person I'm praying with. Some of you, I insisted, right? How about this person for you? I think it'll be great. But the idea is, again, provocation, right? The idea is to start this whole movement of not being alone. Let's not be alone. Let's be together because our Christian faith depends on it. That is how we are Christians, that we are first together, we love, we have actions, and then we also talk about those actions. So today, I want to provoke all of us. If you haven't thought of it, think about this coming alongside someone thing that we are doing. And it's so bad that when I write to people about it, I don't even know how to use these words. I'm like alongside, come alongside, prayer partner. I don't know what it is, right? Maybe I need to do a better job of articulating that, right? But what I do know is that the idea is pretty clear. I don't know how much time you will spend, what you will do, I don't know. But the idea is very clear that our Christian faith depends on walking alongside each other. Can we do that? Awesome. Amen.
Thank you for tuning in. Please like, comment, and subscribe.